This is a Media Lab podcast.
Dave, that is grotesque.
What are you talking about?
The mask that you're wearing is disgusting.
Am I wearing a mask? I'm just holding. What are you talking about, Kyle?
You're holding a mirror.
In his own garage, Kyle has built a machine, cobbled together with parts found in his friend's church basement and a dumpster behind the local Dairy Queen. This monstrosity is now alive and evil. Kyle has convinced his friend Dave to help stop the apocalypse by reviewing films the machine picks. The ultimate purpose is still unknown, and Kyle could have probably done this himself, but he's not being dragged to hell alone. This is Kyle and Dave versus the machine.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. My name is Kyle.
And my name is Dave.
And I'm the machine.
A podcast where a sentient machine forces us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse. Although we do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. For whatever reason, the machine is so intensely focused on the films of 1999. So today, we're going to be watching the film Eyes Wide Shut.
Look, women they basically just don't think like that.
Millions of years of evolution, right? Men have to stick it in every place they can, but for women it is just about security and commitment and whatever the fuck else.
A little oversimplified, Alice, but yes, something like that.
If you men only knew.
I'll tell you what I do know is you got a little stoned tonight, you've been trying to pick a fight with me, and now you're trying to make me jealous.
You've never been jealous about me, have you?
No, I haven't.
And why haven't you ever been jealous about me?
Well, I don't know, Alice. Maybe because you're my wife, and I know you would never be unfaithful to me.
You are very, very sure of yourself, aren't you?
No. I'm sure of you. Do you think that's funny?
I mean, in a way, Dave, I don't know whether we should be wearing masks, if we should both be nude while watching this.
You're not nude?
Oh,
I bottom down. That's the thing about Zoom.
Yeah, I guess I can't tell. You're just Donald Ducking it over there. Okay, I think where we need to start with this, Dave, is first, what is your relationship with Stanley Kubrick broadly? And then what is your relationship with this film specifically?
Well, me and Stanley, we love to Donald Duck. It's one of the things that...
That's an image I never wanted to have in my head.
I know, just hanging out on the couch, bottomless. Kubrick is, I don't know, everybody's got a relationship with him or his work, whether it's inadvertent. I would call it inadvertently, not intentionally. I have loved or hated, but certainly had an opinion about basically every movie he's ever made that I have contact with.
That's like me and your opinions.
I mean, I'm sure there's going to be the exceptions out there. I never come away from a Kubrick film feeling not strongly one way or the other. Like, it's not if it's
feeling
not,
calm.
Right. It's not like, well, I guess it was a movie, or it's like I feel nothing about this. It's either like, okay, I have very strong positive or very strong negative reactions to that.
Often both, but
yeah.
I think the first one I didn't know it was a Kubrick film, but I loved Spartacus. I just love the...
by the way, I should let you know, I am Spartacus.
No, I'm Spartacus.
Don't do that. And then, Full Metal Jacket. And I think I came back around to Clockwork Orange just because of how offensive it is in its existence. The Shining I watched later because I'm not a big fan of horror films, but fuck, that's a crazy good movie.
I think shout out to one of my absolutely all-time favorite movies, which is Dr. Strangelove.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of that movie, and I think it's kind of sometimes not talked about as much as I'd like it to be.
I didn't even know that was a Kubrick film. I watched it for Clouseau, and I think it's a weird movie.
Oh, yeah.
But as I see how it places and who made it, it's supposed to be weird as fuck, because Kubrick don't do normal, man. He likes to build molds. I don't think he even breaks molds. I think he just builds molds.
He's just a very unique perspective on things. I think he was never all that interested in even like preserving a specific style, you know, the way that Tarantino does, where it's like, okay, this is very obviously a Tarantino film just by the color palette. Like Kubrick
By
was
the,
always
plagiarism. Oh, sorry.
right. Well,
Keep going.
I mean, just Kubrick was interested in different forms, different styles, different subject matters. Like he just kind of bounced all over the place. It is still fascinating to me that him and Spielberg were such good friends, because I can't think of two different filmmakers in many ways, where I think Spielberg sometimes, to his fault, gets too preoccupied with what the audience is going to think. Yet at the same time, I think that's the exact opposite of Kubrick. I think sometimes he doesn't preoccupy himself enough with what the audience is going to think. He kind of just does his own thing and kind of screw everyone else. He's just going to do this very singular thing that he wants to do.
Particularly that core group coming through, like, let's say 40s through the 80s, that there's a community of filmmakers, whether they're big commercial sort of
Right.
Hollywood guys, whatever, and they have a community. And again, whether they like each other, I have no idea. But, you know, learning about this bet with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and then reading up a little bit on Kubrick about his relationship in comparison to Hitchcock and Tarantino and Scorsese. And I don't know what's going on now. I mean, I'm trying to imagine if Rob Reiner's high-fiving fucking David O. Russell. I mean, you know, I have no idea
Right. Yeah.
what the world is like today. I mean, the fact that Sidney Pollack is like, I don't know. The whole thing's fascinating.
Well, actually, we should uncover that there's actually two directors that make kind of small cameos in this movie. If we watched it, we haven't actually watched it yet, so who knows?
Sorry.
Just reading the IMDb cast list, you might know that there's some actors that are in this. What you just said is actually very interesting, and I don't know enough to make a grand claim, although I'd love someone to do a research on that, because I think I feel there's a feeling that I have that, yeah, there's like 90s to early 2000s. Doesn't seem to be that palling around that you see with like Coppola, Lucas, Spielberg, there's someone else I forget, but Scorsese that are kind of all in that kind of camp. Whereas like now, like there's up and coming directors that I feel are like glomming on, because you have like, you know, Greta Gerwig and her husband that I just blanked on his name.
You know, the guy.
Yeah, the guy. Et cetera, et cetera. There's a
He's
bunch
not
of these.
Donald Ducking, by the way. That's why we don't know. Yeah.
Exactly. Wes Anderson, et cetera. Like they all kind of seem to like work with each other and want to collaborate and stuff like that. That just didn't happen for whatever reason for that generation. Anyways, getting back to this film specifically, do you remember at all like the buzz that was coming around Eyes Wide Shut? Because I actually vividly remember the talk about this film back in 1999.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it. The more we talk about having not seen it yet, the more I think that I have never seen it. Does that still make sense, right?
Sure.
I do remember though, like, yeah, as this is coming out, and again, I was like, I love movies, but I'm not a film nerd, so I didn't research so I know nominally who Stanley Kubrick is. Obviously, everybody knows who Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman are. This movie is coming out on the promotional thing, and all I know about it is sex cults and masks.
Right.
And that's it. And so I was not particularly interested in giving anybody. I mean, here's the thing. It was like $6 then. So that says something. It wasn't, 40. I think Mulan is $40 to stream. Fuck you, Disney.
I think I can wait till December to stream it if I want to. There's that element of it of like the subject matter of the movie, which like not in a million years would my parents have taken me to see this. They're not going to rent this for me.
No.
Because it's like just based off the subject matter. But I was actually subscribed. I don't know if I've ever admitted this on the show yet, but I was subscribed to Entertainment Weekly magazine for a few years through the end of high school and into university.
Have no shame. Yeah. There's just nothing.
Not that it's like Cahiers du Cinéma or something like that from France. It's not like the epitome of film writing by any imagination, but it was like informed me on the fact that, hey, Stanley Kubrick is this big important figure. He has just passed away. He didn't get a chance to fully finish this film necessarily the way that he wanted to. He hasn't made a film in 12 years. Like this is his like kind of come back into Hollywood. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman are like these two huge stars that are married currently. They're starring in this thing. So there was all these elements coming. And I distinctly remember it being pretty polarizing when the film came out as far as the reaction to it. But this was all me from the sidelines. Like I hadn't seen it. I didn't know anything about it really, other than like base level plot descriptions. So it was just like, oh, okay, I know of it. And then it, over the years, I just have never had a chance to actually sit down and watch it yet. And I really do think that the subject matter has prevented me from jumping into this. It's not like something that's like, oh, I have to watch this movie. Unlike something else that is on my list of shame from Stanley Kubrick, which is I've never seen 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I consider, like, I'm a film fan.
I'm just pressing stop now. I'm just going to press stop now. How the fuck are we making a movie podcast,
I don't know.
Kyle?
I can quote "Thus Spake Zarathustra," the music that plays in it, but that's
you
about
went
it.
Nietzsche.
Yeah,
I would say "Thus spoke Zarathustra."
Oh, is that how you say it? Whatever.
Yeah, I'm a loser.
I was always more of a Sartre fan.
I will say that it is long.
Yes, it is a 2 hour and 40-minute long film.
Oh, I was talking about 2001: Space Odyssey.
Well, yeah, it's
And
like 3 hours. Yeah.
when you see it, we'll talk about what you think about it. But like we talked about,
we're all monkeys, Dave.
well, that's a dangerous thing to say these days, Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
You may have ruined us on the PC content. Yeah, I was just thinking the other day that it'd be great if we could sit down together, Donald ducking it, and watch a sex cult movie. So
yeah, let's do it. Let's
I'm
just
ready.
do it. All right.
I'm ready.
Let me go and thank some sponsors, and then when we return, we'll be talking about Eyes Wide Shut.
Hey everyone, just Kyle breaking into the episode one more time to tell you about some of the sponsors that help make this show continue to go. I just want to point out the fact that both myself and Dave got through this entire episode without making a single joke about the mask wearing and Eyes Wide Shut and the mask wearing of our current situation. So truthfully, who are the real heroes? Listen, Kyle and Dave versus the Machine is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This episode of Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is brought to you by Park Power, a provider of electricity and natural gas in Alberta that offers low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. In Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your energy from. If you choose Park Power, your money stays here. Plus, Park Power shares its profits with local not-for-profits that are working to make a difference for their communities. Shopping local is very important to Park Power's owner, Chris Gazowski, and we love local here at the Alberta Podcast Network, so it's a great fit. Learn more at parkpower.ca. This episode of Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is also brought to you by CPA Alberta. CPA Alberta represents more than 29,000 CPAs, also known as Chartered Professional Accountants, across the province. CPAs are more than number crunchers who love Excel spreadsheets. They are business leaders, finance experts, trusted advisors, and entrepreneurs. They work in many different industries, from film to fashion, from government to oil and gas. Long story short, CPAs didn't just break the mold, they made their own. CPAs can help you spark your next big idea, pivot during difficult times, start your new business off on the right foot, and so much more. For an inside look at how Alberta CPAs are supporting their clients through the pandemic, follow CPA Alberta on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. You can also visit cpaalberta.ca to find out more.
You know what, Dave? Sometimes I think that in life, we're always wearing masks. Did you ever think about that? That we're just like always wearing masks?
It's pretty deep. I feel like we need to be smoking some pot.
Yeah. Should probably write like a thesis on this.
Man.
So non-spoilery, what are your initial thoughts on Eyes Wide Shut?
Maybe I'll just take it through an experiential timeline. For the first 30 minutes, I didn't want to keep watching this movie. By the 168th minute, I thought,
Right.
I'm glad I worked through it. And if we had hypothetically watched this on our own at night, I pretty much had some type of low-grade PTSD where I couldn't sleep because my brain was doing fucking backflips trying to figure out what I had just sat through.
Right.
But like, since we just watched it, I'll be fine. It's going to be okay.
I mean, the one thing I will agree with you on is I also was having a kind of negative reaction to this movie for the first 20, 30 minutes. I thought people were acting weird and they were speaking in this weird, like, semi-code. And I was like, what is going on? Again, it's all part of the experience. And I do understand ultimately what the point of it is. In many ways, did you at all watch the movie that just got dropped on video on demand called Bloodshot, starring Vin Diesel here this past like few months ago.
No,
it's not a good movie, but I'm going to spoil Bloodshot. So
I'm just watching you dig deeper into your shit. So Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah, and now Bloodshot. I watched Bloodshot. That's right. So, by the way, I've made time to not watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, yet spent $20 watching Bloodshot. So, anyways,
I don't understand why you are the thing that you are.
I watched Bloodshot, starring Vin Diesel, and spoiler for that movie, it is an awful, horrendously bad B-level movie for the first 20 minutes. And then they pull a twist on you to show you that that was the point, because it's all in his head, and he's enacting a bad movie, B-level. And if the dismount and the rest of the movie had been like phenomenal, I would have been like, this is amazing. This is one of the best movies of all time. Unfortunately, you have to sit through a bad movie that is still a bad movie afterwards. But it's like, that's a cool twist.
They did not stick the landing.
This is the reverse of that, which is that you kind of get through that, and then you can kind of get sucked into this movie that is all about, for me at least, tone and feeling, and this feeling kind of lost. Part of me started to feel wistful. I don't know if you ever did this, Dave. I love visiting cities, and I'm thinking mostly of like New York, Austin, Texas was like this when I was there. I just like walking the streets at night. That sounded bad. I like I like walking around the city, just like walking around the city.
No one is
late at night, and just kind of like dipping into like a bar, seeing what's going on, and then walking down and going into this place. And I just don't know, it gives me this weird feeling of the city, and this cool feeling that I'm kind of seeing something that I'm not, and that most people don't get to see. I did that a lot in like San Francisco too, which has one of my greatest memories, where I heard like distant blues music playing, and I wound my way and found myself in this place that only allowed like 30 people, standing room only, and had like the best blues band I've ever seen in my life, because the guy was 80 years old strumming like a ukulele, and I was like, what is going on? That's basically what Tom Cruise does this entire movie. He just like walks around, meets these weirdos, gets sucked into like this conspiracy, but even the conspiracy doesn't really matter. Like, that's not what the point of this movie is. It's all about that feeling until we ultimately get to the real point of the movie, which I won't reveal until spoilers. But I ended up just being so into the experience that I kind of forgot and stopped caring about what the plot was. And it's like, I want to see where this goes and where this ultimately leads me. By the end of it, I was glad of having gone on the experience. I ended up like loving this movie. Straight up, I really love this movie. And if we had been talking before we started recording, which we never do, but if we had started talking about this movie beforehand, I know that you have mentioned that you probably don't want to revisit this movie ever, and I really do, because I think there's going to be more stuff that's revealed to me, having just knowing now what the ultimate thing is, that I can stop worrying about like, well, what's going on, and is this person doing this thing, and just kind of let it wash over me here again.
That's essentially what your last 4 relationships have been like as well.
That's a lot to throw at you, but
yeah, I like, one joke is just thinking about you walking the streets and asking strangers if they want to have a good time. You know, the one thing more seriously is I didn't watch this thinking Tom Cruise character was doing this in a benign fashion. I think this was more psychologically like the Heart of Darkness thing. I mean,
I think you're right. I guess I shouldn't have phrased it that way necessarily. As a viewer, that's what it felt like he was taking me on this journey. But I think this is another movie. This is another movie that we keep coming back to this. I don't think this is necessarily a 1999 thing. I think it's still pervasive in many ways, but it's like that fragile masculinity, right? Like, he is so upset by his wife just mentioning that she might have fantasized about a guy a year ago. Like, that's basically the impetus of this whole movie. That he freaks out because of that.
Yes, and I'm not going to argue that. And I think that's, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but that's, the central, it's the central theme of sort of the motivations of the characters. But it wasn't casually mentioned. And this is the hardest part of getting through the first 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Is
her telling that story.
Yeah, and the dialogue up to that point, like you said, it's not just in a code. I mean, it is, but it's not just that part that's awkward. Everything is so surreal and antagonistic. Like,
that's a great word to use. Like, everything seems like,
it's a fight.
I don't know, it's fight or the anger or And as the movie goes through, I feel like everyone is like overtly sexual in like weird ways. Even it's like even like the Alan Cumming character, who's just like a desk clerk for like 5 minutes of the movie, probably not even that long. It's like, boy, like this is dripping in like sexual tension.
Yeah.
And again, intentionally, but it's just like it does give you that weird sense the entire movie that everything is overtly sexualized, even benign encounters.
Yeah, I mean, we already mentioned we don't know Stanley personally, other than
besides the Donald Ducking as you sit and watch movies.
Fascination with Donald Ducking. This is a core theme for Stanley, which is that this psychology that we are not what American values project we're supposed to be. We are not happy, we are not loving, and we are not kind at our core. And I think all of his movies, whatever the genres are attempts, not even attempts, successful shots at peeling all of that away and showing both the worst case scenario, the baseness, the gore, the violence, and then some type of redemption, whether we agree. I think that's might be where the tension in watching his movies is whether you fall in line with feeling like he did resolve your crisis, your personal crisis of faith while watching the movie, or if you leave there feeling hollow, like he's completely, gut shot at you, punched you in your Donald Duck nuts, or like just, thrown shit in your face and you don't know how to deal with it as an individual. And I think when I leave a movie of his where I'm either detached from the scenario or I feel like it was resolved to my own cynical understanding of human nature, then I'm like, oh, this is great. But this movie is, it's quite jarring, especially, being married, having a kid. Mm-hmm. It's a very weird thing to experience.
I agree. Kids, in general, are a weird experience.
Well, let's do some background information before we jump into talking about this more, because I think there's a lot to unpack for this movie. It's going to be
30 minutes, Kyle. We haven't even got there. This is great. This is going to be a 4-hour episode. Buckle up, folks.
Buckle up, folks. Okay, so Eyes Wide Shut was released on July 16th, 1999. The only other movie of note that was released on the same day was Lake Placid, directed by Steve Miner, written by David E. Kelly, starring Bill Pullman, Bridget Fonda, and Oliver Platt.
That's the giant crocodile.
Giant crocodile, yes.
Perfect. Why do I even
There's
know
a lot of giant crocodile movies, I just realized. It's like
crocodiles
that
are gross,
Crawl
man.
And
Yeah, they're so gross.
So this is where it gets hard because this is not showing us a snapshot of what people thought in 1999, but what people in the year 2020 think. It is currently rated 7.4 on IMDb, 68 on Metacritic, and over on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 156 critics, it's at 75%, and then 192,615 users have it rated at 73%. So it's a certified fresh movie. I'm actually the most surprised at that user rating for this movie, to be perfectly frank.
As in it's too low?
No, I think it's way higher than I was anticipating most users to rate this movie. Anyways, it is available on DVD or Blu-ray. You can buy or rent it on iTunes. You can also rent it on Google Play or YouTube. And in Canada, we should be sponsored by them. You can stream it via the Stars app.
Honestly, Stars, show me the money, man.
Yeah, really?
When's Jerry Maguire? That's not 99. If it
was a few years before this. This is also the other surprising thing. Its budget was $65 million. It opened to 21 million. Domestically, it made 55. Internationally, it made another 106. So it brought in $162 million or $253 million with inflation. This was a hit. Like, this made money. Again, somewhat surprising for the length and subject matter. But maybe Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were just a pull back in 1999 to bring people out.
Think about the story, too. I mean, Kubrick's dead. We know that this is his last film. In Europe and in the world where they might appreciate rawer films and less popcorn shit. I mean, it's exciting stuff, man.
Yeah, it is.
Sex cults. Who doesn't want to watch a sex cult?
Who indeed? Its plot description from IMDb is: a New York City doctor embarks on a harrowing, night-long odyssey of sexual and moral discovery after his wife reveals a painful secret to him. It stars Tom Cruise as Dr. William Harford, Nicole Kidman as Alice Harford, Julianne Davis as Mandy, and Sidney Pollack as Victor Ziegler. Anything you want to say about those actors? I think we've kind of mentioned them all already.
just a comment on the way you, and this is probably because you're a theater nerd, but the way that you spoke the synopsis and described the characters, it sounds like a play. I don't know why. It's just, there's something about the tone. I think this movie kind of sets up in a fraction.
You could make this a play if you really wanted to, I think. Yeah.
But the requirement would be that the audience would all have to come in and Donald Duck it. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be
Why
in
even
character.
hold the play in the first place at that point?
We should just name this episode Donald Duck because
Yeah, really.
I'm way off topic here.
It was written by Stanley Kubrick and Frederick Raphael, based on the novel Traum Novelle by Arthur Schnitzler, which, by the way, if you read up on this, that original novel published in like the 1920s is literally the exact same plot, save for like one small thing, but literally it's the exact same plot. The other writer, though, the co-writer, Frederick Raphael, he worked extensively, mostly in the 60s and 70s. This was his first and only collaboration with Kubrick. And he only wrote one more thing after this, a TV movie called Coast to Coast in 2003. So this is, honestly, I couldn't tell if it was Italian television or British television. Not that that matters, but it's like nothing even rang sort of a bell besides this movie in his entire like history of credits.
Without doing any research, I wonder too, like this Hollywood thing about what entitles you to a writing credit. Everything I read about Stanley Kubrick is that he likely wrote this movie.
Yeah.
And maybe this fella like added something that by union rules had to be included.
Had to be included. Yeah.
Because, maybe he like did some typefacing. He told him to italicize something, and he's like, well, send me a check, yo.
By rules.
Yeah.
That's how I have a writing credit on Cabin Boy.
Of course, this is directed by Stanley Kubrick. We've talked about him already in this episode. Just talking about his last few films. This is the order they came out in. The Killing, Paths of Glory, Spartacus, Lolita, Doctor Strangelove, 2001, A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket. So
Fucking
even
ridiculous,
just those
man.
last six, Doctor Strangelove, 2001, Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket. It's like, I don't know how else you talk about them. Whether you love him or hate him, there is no way to disregard Stanley Kubrick's influence in any of those genres, both like the horror genre for The Shining, kind of the science fiction stuff of 2001, the satire and war movie of Doctor Strangelove, and I literally don't know where to go from that. That entire list of credits, people graduating film school right now would like sell their soul to be able to say, "Oh, these were my last 5 films." You know what I mean?
They would murder you.
Yeah, I think this goes back to what we were discussing before, where he kind of just did his thing and then influenced everybody else afterwards. Because it's not like 2001 was something that like every space movie was doing at that time. It was literally this huge, gigantic thing that he just wanted to do. Clockwork Orange was this weird, odd, like super violent, hyper-masculine thing that, again, inspired a bunch of films afterwards. The Shining, like,
Also
as much as
satirical, yep.
Stephen King hates that movie, I mean, it influences what people think about what The Shining is. And then I have my own thing with Full Metal Jacket, but I've grown to kind of love that movie too.
Yeah, first half is great. I think the brief sort of history with Stanley Kubrick, he's one of these guys, which we'll never know the truth of, but one of these guys with that story of so smart he was bad at school type of thing. High IQ, apparently made some money winning chess games in Central Park. So
Really?
This is a guy that there's something very intentional, something very pragmatic and strategic about everything he seems to touch. And reading briefly about even him coming into filmmaking, how he self-funded and privately funded some of his documentaries and short films. This guy just had an idea that he would build, and he just built it.
And I think I have mentioned it on this show before, but he was working on another film while he passed away with this, which was AI, which eventually Spielberg would make. And I have gone on record, I think the first 2 hours and 10 minutes are 5 out of 5, like one of my favorite movies, and then it kind of biffs it in the last 20. But I love that film up until that point, and I like jumping back into it every so often. So this is his unique, very idiosyncratic look at life, I guess.
So you'll watch Haley Joel Osment, but you won't watch 2001 Space Odyssey. What?
No.
What are we talking about again? No. All right, let's move on.
Okay, I think one of the things about this movie, Eyes Wide Shut, why it's so hard to talk about, I think, is I think there's three different elements that really need to be broken down, which is the straight up the text, like what is actually happening in the movie, the subtext, like what is trying to be communicated based on the actions of what the characters are doing. And I think there's also the metatextual stuff, which I know you hate talking about, but I can't not think about it, which is the fact that this is a movie starring Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise, while they were still married. And I think that this adds this other extra element to this that would not be there had this been just like random actor or actress brought together for this movie. So let's start with the text. Nicole Kidman, admits to this like torrid imagination she has for the sailor that she saw in the hotel that they stayed at the summer before, and how she thought about him romantically, and like basically very detailed about like the positions and what she wanted him to do to her. And this sends the Tom Cruise character just down this dark hole where when he's called out to see a patient, the daughter of the patient that has just passed away forces herself on him, professes her love. And I really think that freaks him out, and he continually goes and tries to find a release. I think get back at his wife. Like that's what it feels like to me. He's trying to find a relationship that he can get back at her, which sucks him into like the sex cult, which sees like this weird like conspiracy that's going on. He has a relationship with a prostitute. Like there's all these, runs into this weird thing with a costume shop owner and his daughter that is kind of left unsaid about what is exactly going on there. She's not his daughter.
Yeah, she's a prostitute. Yeah. But before that, I mean, I think what's very intentional, other than, and this is the part of the 30 minutes that's quite jarring, that Nicole Kidman is essentially naked for the first 30 minutes.
Yes. I think that Sydney Pollack should have been completely nude as well.
Is that there is an intentional projection, this Great Gatsby-like illusion, and is shot in this hazy thing about what Americans would consider the perfect life. Ballrooms, rich people, champagne, beautiful women hitting on him, and he's above it. I'm a doctor to these trillionaires, and these two models clearly just want to jump on my lap, but I'm good. Like he's so, we use the word benign, but I think it's intentional, but it's hard to understand until the end of the movie that is a plot device rather than a weird entry, because even then the dialogue feels so choppy and so weird, because you go from them getting ready. Later it makes more sense, but she's sitting there at first like almost posing naked, and then all of a sudden she's on the toilet, and then you're at this ball and she somehow is just blackout drunk with some creepy old man, and then you're like, what? Like I just sat there like almost grasping my hair, like what the fuck is going on here? And so when she gets to her revelation, allegedly smoking some reefer, as they used to call it.
Yeah, I don't know. This is really such a weird 90s thing about like how pot is used in films. Like, I don't know if that's really what weird pot is like. Not that I'm like a big druggie, but it's like, I don't think that's how it works. But whatever. That's the plot device that this movie has decided to use.
Yeah. And it might be because it was written in the 1920s, but they were doing some different drugs in the 1920s too. But I think, and maybe this is the context of being married, it was jarring how antagonistic she was. And I mean, there is definitely
not to let him off the hook either, I have to say. Like, yes, she's being antagonistic 100%, but like they're both kind of, I don't know, one of those things like being angry at each other without just like being angry with each other. Like there's like weird threats and like subtext going on, and it's like, whoa, like this is something I don't want to be a part of.
And we would use now the word privilege, which is that he is a wealthy, good-looking, successful doctor with a beautiful wife, a child, and so he feels like the world makes sense. And so how could anyone challenge his sort of crystal ball?
Yeah.
And so his character, I think in reflection, has this very naive and privileged position at the beginning. They do these intentional shots where he's at his doctor's office, both with an unnecessarily naked model where he's feeling her breasts, but he clearly has no sexual sort of connection with them. And then like old people, like, so they give you the full pantheon of his day, and it seems very, very cold. But then, the moment she reveals this torrid sexual fantasy that she had, and that whole scene was very hard to watch.
Yeah, I think that is the key to this. It is a fantasy that she shares with him.
Yes.
And I think it is there and he states this in that scene, but I think it's there to try and make him jealous. So whether this even happened or not, I have no idea.
No.
And I think, again, beside the point, but she's trying to make him jealous, and that literally
It breaks
ruins
the glass, right?
it breaks the glass, and he doesn't know how to handle it. And then that's the rest of the plot of the movie, of him trying to make sense of the world, and it increasingly becomes clear that the world doesn't make sense.
The world would make complete sense if you let me blow it up.
I just hit this meta thing because you want to go meta with their relationship, but how much this is a parallel of what's going on with American culture right now. And how, the sort of patriarchal, white dominant, elitist, capitalist people just had their glass broken, and how they are now in a descent to hell because they don't know how to deal with the fact that their world perception was incorrect. He makes the big thing like, oh, I don't feel anything for these women. These women feel nothing for me. I'm literally just a functioning doctor, and this is my role. And then the next scene is this insanely lustful but distraught woman who tries to lick his face. And you're like, that is quite jarring too, because where does that come from? Except...
The more we're talking about this, the more I realize that this movie is actually mostly to do with class, like where you fit in the spectrum. Because one of the criticisms I was going to bring up, and now I don't know if it is a criticism, is like, this is a very privileged movie. This is about rich people having rich people problems, which it still is. Like, it still is. But this is not someone who is like the top 1%. Like, the top 1% are the people in that sex cult that he eventually stumbles upon.
Yes.
Who can make people disappear, who can make things happen, and just do what we say, or else the same thing is going to happen to you. So, he's achieved that American dream, and he's given a tiny peek behind the curtain, and it's like, this isn't for you.
Well,
and what you thought how the world worked isn't how it works, and we get to actually pull the strings.
They do that quick gut shot, which is that they knew he was wrong because he arrived in a cab, right? So here's this multi-million-dollar earning private doctor, but he's
and
subservient.
We would not sully ourselves by being in a cab,
right?
Yeah.
He's subservient. You're like nothing. Even in the conclusion with Sidney Pollack, it's like, you're nothing. It's not worth that. I can't believe you pushed it this far because, you're a piece of shit. Just let it go. Get back to your little life as a doctor in this like Manhattan loft. Just move on. It's mental.
And the reason I guess why I frame this as being him trying to get back at his wife in some way, because it does feel like he's hit on by that woman, which makes him go do the walk around. And that's when he first meets up with the prostitute. And they don't really do anything. In fact, I should say that what is fascinating about this movie is that Tom Cruise doesn't have sex once in this movie. And again, part of the point, which I'm going to get to here in a moment, I think that actually leads us into subtext here in a moment.
Oh, my favorite type of text.
Like, he's trying, I think, to get back at her by doing the typical male fantasy, but he keeps finding himself like, this doesn't feel correct, or at least getting interrupted and snapping him out of himself.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that it shows, I think in the end, what I liked about this is it's contrasting or putting into focus these little lines, right? Like, it's not just couples, but human beings, when they encounter other people that they're sexually or physically attracted to, there's a psychological, or like maybe a physiological thing, there's a psychological thing where we create stories, and then there's this action. And then even in the action, there are these little barriers, right? It's like, you can't just go out and be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to have sex with somebody that I meet next on the street. It's like, it's a very elaborate social construct. And like, Kubrick's like very well aware of that. So you would think that the first moment he meets this prostitute, that he's going to make this quote unquote mistake. And that's where the movie's going. But that is 100%. Not
That's
what
exactly
happens,
what I thought
right?
the movie's going to be. I'm like, oh, that's whatever. And
It got a lot weirder, but
it got way weirder. I think that leads us into the subtext, because this movie is filled to the brim with naked women and temptation and the female body. So I want to start there, because that will also lead to a criticism I actually have of the movie itself. I do not understand how this movie is rated R. Like, I don't get how it does not have an NC-17 rating with the amount of full frontal nudity for as long as it is on screen for.
I don't know what the guidelines are, but I do know that we saw more penis in Fight Club than we did in this.
Right.
I'm seeing more penis right now.
In research, it turns out that they had to bring it, they had to do digital editing to bring it down to an R. So it definitely was an NC-17 movie, or worse, X-rated maybe by design. But for marketability, to actually sell this and have a wide release, they had to edit it. They definitely straddled the line, pun sort of, not even a pun, but like literally straddled some stuff here.
Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, while he's walking around that, like, the sex cult mansion, like, it is softcore pornography that we were watching, which, by the way, is the moment that my roommate came home while I was watching that bit. And I'm like, oh, well, hi.
Here's, like, by the time the sex cult stuff started happening, I started to think, I don't know if this is a realization, because I don't know if I can say this is true. I began to think that the lead into this movie is to desensitize you, so that by the time the sex cult thing happened and towards the end of the movie, there's a numbness. It's not even particularly arousing, let's say, if you're a heterosexual male, to be around so many naked women. It's like, by the point you get to the cadaver, it's just, I don't know, you get numb. Because I think his point was that lust is this, I mean, it's not just a sin, but it's like, it's visual and it's very short-winded. You know, you can't just sit there watching, 2 hours and 48 minutes of naked women and still be aroused by it. And I think that's a meta statement about this idea of affairs. There's this excitement with people that, that cheat on people or have, sexual sort of conquests. But there's a reason as well why it's a bit short-lived, because that excitement disappears very quickly. And that's
the thing about it, is like, even though there is those naked bodies on screen, I definitely think there's some titillation to happen in there, but I don't find it to be all that erotic after a while, where it's just like, this is
grotesque.
It's grotesque, gratuitous.
Yeah.
I will say this is kind of that criticism I was about to say. I know that the argument back would be, this is kind of being seen through the Tom Cruise character, so it's a lot of like this female imagery, and we start with like Nicole Kidman also being naked in this movie. And I think this is a 2020 interpretation. I do not think I would have thought of this in 1999. I feel that there should be equal opportunities then in this case. There should be naked men in this movie. If Nicole Kidman is asked to be fully nude in this movie, I do not see why Tom Cruise could not have been asked to do the same thing.
I wonder, I mean, this is probably not true, but it would be fascinating that if the quote-unquote director's cut, if that's what had to be cut out for it to be R. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but judging by Kubrick's, I mean, not fact, I don't know that this is possible, but judging by Kubrick's work, I don't think that he is somebody that stays in that zone, who thinks that to sell a movie, you need to sexualize a woman. I suspect, and I'm probably wrong about this, that the scenes that they cut out, judging by what was left in, was probably just penises and naked men. Because Hollywood's got a huge problem with that.
Well, it is. And then, like, talking about X-rated, like, as soon as there is an erect penis, that is an automatic X-rating.
Yeah, you're not allowed to put it in a theater.
Dicks be gross. For
better or for worse. But you can have a TV movie, on a family primetime hour where a woman is 75% naked, miming an orgasm with a man who's under a sheet. Like if we go down that route, we'll just get upset.
Basically, I just want to hashtag free the dongs. I just want
just let them know.
I mean, a part of this is, yes, maybe there's some of my sexuality being bled into this point of view.
Yeah.
I just feel that if you are going to have so much female nudity in the majority, or not the majority, but in so many different American films, I don't see why men shouldn't be asked to do the same.
Well, it's changing a little bit.
It is a little bit.
At least with Ewan and Michael Fassbender, who apparently have very long penises. But I think, in general, that's been a very big hill to climb. We don't want to be too revisionist. I mean, due to social inequality, it was men who were initially in the 40s, 50s paying to watch movies. Yeah. It was men who are making films for other men. So it's like, there is a quote unquote reason why those standards were so skewed for so long. But certainly we hope that either there's a lot more penis, or they just cut back on this idea that women should be depicted as being objects of pornographic sort of imagery, and they can just, be human beings. Can you imagine like watching a superhero movie where a woman doesn't have to be in a
I thought you were like, well, can't we watch a superhero movie and then see a penis? Like, come on, we can.
Yeah,
we can
well,
be that.
I mean, I'm watching The Boys, and I'm watching some. I mean, we're getting there. Never mind penis, but it's just fucking grotesque and hard to watch. But we are trying to challenge some of those norms. But
here's really what plays into the subtext, which is the final line of this movie. Sorry to mum, but Nicole Kidman saying to her husband, "We need to fuck." And I really think that that's what the movie is about, is their inability to actually have intimacy and open communication. And that's really what's driving him. He's seeking that and doesn't know how to talk to his wife, hides what he's been doing that one night. And it really just comes down to them having to actually, commit to each other again, have that loving act. Because even at the beginning where they are like enwrapped with each other and she looks weirdly into the mirror, I think that is to kind of hopefully, this is my own interpretation, I should point out, her kind of pointing to the audience like there's some impotency here. Like we're not actually having sex right now. We're trying to, but it's not actually happening.
I have the opposite cynical interpretation, which is that I don't think this movie is a romance, and I don't think they make it after that.
Well, that's the other thing. That's the metatextual. It seems like they broke up 2 years after this movie came out.
Well, yeah, I don't know the timeline, but yeah, the idea that after all of this, and I interpreted at the beginning that they are having sex, but they're, like you kind of bring up, they're not necessarily in love, whatever that means. I mean, that's a very dangerous line to draw too, but
yeah.
It seems fairly obvious by the way this movie collapses, like the story collapses in on itself, that they, like you said, they don't know each other at all at this point. And whether you should know to those depths every thought process that everybody has, I mean, that's a whole other ethical and psychological debate. But by the end, I left, and this may be why I have this PTSD feeling, although I don't want to overuse that term because that obviously has different connotations, but I left this movie thinking, how could that be the solution? They've both almost destroyed themselves chasing the concept, this privileged concept of pleasure and entitlement to sex by deciding that they just need to fuck each other one more time. That's mental. But it is also, I think, meant to be a reflection of the world in which this exists. That, it's an addict mentality, that you can fix the problem by adding more of the same problem. The best way to solve the fact that we both are seeking sex with other people is to have more sex with each other. That's like a very strange thing.
Sure.
And it's not unrealistic. I think it's what's so jarring about walking away from this movie. I think after everything they went through, trying to pantomime being a relationship. I mean, yeah, like thinking about, in front of the kid, having had this breakdown, realizing at that point in the movie that it's only been two days, I think.
2 days, I think.
It feels like a year.
It feels so much longer.
So much going on.
The vast majority of this movie probably
happens.
At least an hour and 50 minutes of this 2.5 hour long movie is that one night. Like, it's they spent a lot of time in that one night.
It's almost like to the minute of how it's being experienced in a sense. It feels like that, like you're really into it. A little drawback for me is that this doesn't feel 99. This feels, I mean, he's 70 something, but the way New York's characterized feels very 1970s to me. And then I couldn't get over the red-green color palette of this movie. It just felt, I know it's intentional, and I know there are so many implications to the color.
Oversaturating it, like,
oh my God.
To an nth degree.
Except for the one part, I think, with the cadaver where everything just suddenly turns into this washed out blue.
Dead bodies can be beautiful.
I don't normally get so into color grading, but this one was so jarring. And it's clear from his past work that he just loves using color in this way to incite emotional attachment to the work. But I was getting very overwhelmed with everything that was going on. And then all of a sudden you get this like blood red fucking shag carpet somewhere, or this like, heavy Christmassy green wallpaper with ornate shit. I'm just like, my God, tired.
Yeah, and I think this is, to bring this up again, super political, but this is a problem with a lot of, I find, white filmmakers from that time period who like came through the 50s, 60s, 70s. This takes place in New York. I have to go scene by scene. I don't know how many black people are actually shown in this movie.
None. Yeah, except for the morgue employee who advertised no direct eye contact. So
right. But it's like how you shoot a movie in New York City without any non-white people is like crazy to me.
He gets bullied by a gang of white fucking frat boys, like on the streets of. Yeah.
And then the other thing, again, I don't know if this is because he didn't have a chance to like finish off the editing and stuff like that. There's one shot that bugs the heck out of me, which is very near the end. And it opens with his mask showing up on his pillow beside Nicole Kidman. And then he comes in, walks around, and then walks into the room and sees the mask. He's like, I don't know why they showed the mask first. That's supposed to be a reveal. I don't know why they showed it first as an establishing shot and then go and see him walk through. It seems so counterintuitive to me. Anyways, that's such a nitpick.
Yeah, Stanley Kubrick. You hack.
You hack. So 1999 versus now. Do you have any idea what you would have thought if you had actually seen this movie in 1999? Can you try and put yourself back in your shoes 21 years ago?
So the context I wouldn't get, even though, would be the experience of being married and with Helen for 20 years wouldn't have been there. So the subtext of what a marriage is like and how even this like crazy psychotic breakdown reveal of Nicole Kidman's to start the descent into madness, those pieces wouldn't have fit for me personally. In a broader 1999 world, like the rampant nudity, the excessive nudity,
right,
would be difficult to digest, really. And I think what I'm seeing now, this sort of desensitization of it, because, when I'm 21, that's a very virile, high pornographic consumption, very like high energy thing. I think at the beginning, it would have been very difficult to sit through just from a pornographic sense. I'm seeing Nicole Kidman naked. I'm seeing full frontal nudity. By the end, I think I'd just been so worn out and just kind of distraught because this movie just twists that shit and makes it so severe and violent.
It's the trouble with satire and metaphor in many ways, where if you're just not at the right age or it's not something that you can identify with, it's really hard, I think, to lock in. And I don't think I would have liked this movie at all had I watched it in 1999. I would have found it too weird, too off-putting, too bizarre. On the flip side of things, I think we've discussed this very briefly. I think weird movies have the largest chance of quote unquote remaining relevant over time because you're not so tied to a time where it's like, yeah, it's just it's a weird movie. So it doesn't matter when you watch it. It's not really of a place in time. It's just this guy experiencing this weird thing and, you can go with it. Yeah. And now I'm bringing a lot of my own baggage to this. And again, I'm looking for metaphors and the metatextual elements and the subtext that they're talking about, which is again why I want to rewatch this movie at some point just to see if it retains its power.
I think you can say the same thing about all his movies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that, for example, Dr. Strangelove, what I would have liked about it when I saw it when I was, 16 or 15 on VHS, is how silly Peter Sellers is in it, because he's just a silly person.
There's no fighting in the war room.
I wouldn't have got the broader context of the anti-war message and just like the satire of sort of the World War II experience and the Cold War and all that kind of stuff. Stanley Kubrick, has that chess mindset where I think it's intentional. And I think when he builds a movie, he seems to be able to play to all generational concepts. He knows that there needs to be a visual element that's going to be appealing to the youth. There's got to be a philosophical and a psychological thing that will appeal to the older generation. Like every one of his movies is packed with so many different layers and so consistently that even at, how old is he when he makes a 70, 72, you can tell, I think, retrospectively, that he builds this wanting this to be relevant 20 years from now, not to be a commercial success right now, even though he's also looking for commercial. I mean, he's casting Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, so he wants to make money, but the design of it seems to be like, look, just wait till you 19-year-olds are fucking 42. And when you watch this again, you're fucked because this is going to bust your head open. So
Just like this podcast.
I'm curious if that'll happen too. Like talking about filmmakers in their 70s, like Wolf of Wall Street or Scorsese. First off, in both of these cases, I'm like, I can't believe a 70-year-old made this movie. But secondly, it's both of those movies I find people go to and grab a lot of the stuff from the textual elements of it and then like run with it without really looking at the deeper point that each filmmaker is trying to use. Like this is a very deeply disturbing and emotional work. And then Scorsese's case, he's like, this is not how you should be acting at all in any conceivable way. And yet no one really uses it that way. It's like, isn't it fun to have lots of money and take Quaaludes?
Well,
anyways,
I don't know. That's not how I interpret Wolf of Wall Street, but I will say I can see how bro culture, particularly in the United States, the modern United States, contemporary United States, would lose lose it there and just stay at the skimming level, only as a judgmental thing about what we're seeing right now. Kind of like I was alluding to earlier, this movie, I think actually all of his movies kind of peek at what happens when the crystal ball, the sort of like pink shiny cloud, the rose-colored glasses break off, and you have to face what you think you really are. And America's going through that right now, and they've had 60 years of bro culture that, you know, chest bumping and all this shit, and they're starting to realize there's nothing underneath. And they're about to hit the sex cult, Donald Trump style. And we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see if there's redemption.
I can't wait for that election in 2.5 weeks when this releases.
They're gonna elect. I mean, they're gonna elect Donald Trump again. But I think you know what? One of the key things for me too, like you brought up, that he didn't actually have sex with anybody. I mean, think about the miss when they bring up that the girl becomes is testing HIV positive. Yeah. His single decision and the break of getting his wife to call him at that exact moment to pull him back for a second. And then he's about to have sex with a roommate, and then she pulls back. Like, these are all intentional structures from the original book, which are fascinating to me. The opportunities are both rampant and difficult to go through.
Yeah, so, almost like different moral codes that would have been in like early 1920s versus late 90s, and how they're still kind of cobbled together to make
Well, you look at biblical texts; they've been around since the beginning of humankind.
This should have ended with a flood, if you know what I mean.
You know what? A flood of blood coming out of it. You know, yeah.
We're done here.
Okay, so the machine has asked us to wrap this up. So I guess we've kind of maybe answered this, but do you still find this a relevant movie nowadays? Is this culturally relevant, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yes. The caveat being, I don't think anyone under the age of 30 could sit through this or even get something out of it on a deeply moral or personal way. And that's very, very judgmental. But I feel like...
Yeah, I think they could still respect it, I don't know, artistically and visually, but I don't know if they would really... That's me projecting a lot too. But I think I agree with you of really honing in on what this is talking about. I think takes a little bit more time in your life.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like visually it's antiquated. Like I said, when I see the shots of New York, I feel like I'm in the 1970s. It doesn't feel like 1999 to me. You know, watching Tom Cruise in stilts in one scene so he can be eye level with Nicole Kidman. And another scene, he's like at somebody's shoulder. Those little things make this movie a little jarring because of the world we live in today, where you can have someone in a green motion capture suit suddenly become a polar bear. It's, I don't know, right? Like these things are evolving very quickly.
I guess so. Yeah. There's still a lot of stuff I love about this. By the way, that reminds me, Nicole Kidman is one of my favorite quotes of all time after her breakup with Tom Cruise. And this is me paraphrasing. Who knows if this is actually real? I just remember it being reported. The reporter asked her, now that she was divorced from Tom Cruise, like, what are you going to do now? And she was like, wear high heels. And I always thought that was so funny.
I do want to just, I don't know. How do you think the acting was?
I think it's exactly what Stanley Kubrick wanted. Like, and that's hard. That's hard to gauge because would I award either Tom Cruise or Nicole Kidman with awards for this? No, I think it's just a bit too odd. I love Sidney Pollack though. I love watching him act. Sidney Pollack, like well-known director, directed a bunch of great stuff. I love just watching him do prop work. Like the way that he like interacts with the balls, because I feel like a lesser actor. And again, Stanley Kubrick was probably in on this. They would like stand here, talk, give this speech, and he's like bouncing balls and like talking with things.
Glass
and
of scotch, the way
doing the scotch thing. I just love how he uses all the props. I don't know. I just love watching him.
The suspenders as he's like, with the dying prostitute in his bathroom. Like, he's fantastic in the movie. I just got overwhelmed by
all the other stuff. Yeah, I think that Tom Cruise has put in better performances in other movies. Let's put it that way. Because I don't think he's a bad actor. I'm not one of those people. I think that he does his Tom Cruise thing a lot in like the Mission Impossible and Top Guns and that kind of stuff. Who knows?
I want to know the truth.
Who knows if we'll watch Magnolia? But I think that's some great acting that he does.
Don't give the machine any ideas.
I stopped listening to you 20 minutes ago.
I think that brings us to our ratings here. Of course, anyone can go and take a look at our ratings over on our Letterboxd page. That's letterboxd.com/KDVSTM. That'll be in the show notes too, so you can go check that out if you'd like. Dave, what would you rate this movie out of 5?
That's a tough one.
I have to tell you, I was like 100% convinced you were going to hate this movie. So the fact that you had anything positive to say about it, I was actually surprised by.
Well, I think, if we had turned it off at 30 minutes, so it would be 0. It was so hard to stick in there. And no, I actually really like this movie. I think kind of like Boys Don't Cry, and we've talked about this idea of important movies that are difficult to watch again. I think this movie is fantastic in how it deals with its subject matter. The only weird thing, of course, is that Kubrick needed to depict such a weird sex cult to drive the madness. And I won't watch it again because it's just fucking strange and hard to get through.
And I love strange movies. Make them weirder is what I say.
You did rent Bloodshot. So
I did rent Bloodshot. That is true.
I'm going to go with a 4. I might even push a 4.5, but I think a 4, just because I think visually it'll be hard to get young people to watch this movie right now. If we're going to demographics, 40 plus, it's probably a 5, but I'm going to go with a 4 overall. Okay.
Like I've said, I really, really enjoyed this movie eventually. Yes, the first 20 minutes are pretty actually hard to get through, but when you lock into it, I think it gives you a lot of fruit. I have those quibbles with it and some things I didn't like. However, I am giving it a 4.5 out of 5. I really, really liked it. That will go to 4.25. I mean, we're going to be rounding down to a 4 in our overall list on Letterboxd. That being said, it is tied with 2 other films. And interestingly, both of those films, we both rated the exact same as this. So I give it those other 2 films 4.5 and you gave them 4. So the other 2 films are All About My Mother and Ghost Dog. Where do you feel we should place this?
I think above. I mean, it's better than those other 2 movies.
Well, I'm not going to fight you because I actually agree. Which means that Eyes Wide Shut is going to be entering our list at the number 6 position. Let's see if it is able to hold out and be in our top 10 by the end of the year. Dave, we are, of course, in the month of October right now, the spooky month, some might call it.
Ooh.
So I'm interested to see if the machine has given us another dose of terror into our lives.
I thought that we're not doing spoilers, Kyle. I thought we're not doing spoilers on this show.
No spoilers. So let's push. I'm going to push this button and see what it wants us to watch next. Oh, well, it is, I guess, a horror film. We're going to be watching Sleepy Hollow, the Tim Burton film.
Nice.
Which, once again, I have not seen.
What?
So I know it's such a weird thing of weird blocks of time where I just didn't see anything. But hey, Halloween is coming up. Let's watch some horror films. I'm sure we'll get to see some other scary movies as the weeks go on here.
I haven't watched the movie in a long time, but I will say, as I get older, I lose my interest in Tim Burton. So we'll see if I still like this movie or not.
Yeah, we'll see if Tim Burton still holds up for us or if he's too Tim Burton-y. You're gonna keep that mirror, or is that up for grabs?
Well, I just keep looking at myself and trying to. I mean, how do you keep your eyes like this wide
and shut at the same time?
Am I doing it? Am I doing it?
You know what I can do? I can just put like little toothpicks in there and keep your eyes open constantly.
Wrong movie.
Oh, shit.
I'm Spartacus.